It can be harder for a domestic or sexual abuse victim within the criminal justice process because there's lots that they need to consider outside of the criminal justice process. So, for example, it can be harder for them to report the crime because there's many different barriers, such as maybe if it's domestic abuse, maybe they are in a relationship with somebody and they care about them and they don't want to get them in trouble. Maybe they feel like they won't be believed. Maybe they are worried about a breakdown in their family. If it's sexual violence, maybe they would have to talk about a topic that they wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable to talk about. Maybe they're blaming themselves. There's lots of different reasons why it is much harder to report if you've been a victim of a domestic or sexual violence incident. It's a big step for a victim of domestic or sexual abuse to report their crime to the police. There are many reasons why they wouldn't report. Some of these can be fear of judgment, fear of repercussion, caring for the offender if they're in a relationship with them, or fear that they won't be believed. Sometimes the barrier could be that they are worried that they won't get a charge or even a guilty verdict, so they don't want to go through the process. Some victims may not recognise that they've been a victim of a crime, and others may be too embarrassed to come forward. We see this a lot with male victims of crime and with parents whose children are the offender. There isn't much representation in the media that men or parents can be victims of these crime types, and they can feel that they should be able to handle it themselves or shouldn't have let it happen. In some cultures, some of these crime types would not be recognised as a crime, but would be a norm within their community. Therefore, they may not know they can report or that anything is wrong. There are many other barriers to support, but these are the barriers we see more often. Considering the barriers that victims of domestic and sexual abuse may have when coming forward or going through the criminal justice process, it's important that professionals are empathetic and provide them with reassurance and validation that what they're going through is believed and that there will be support for them throughout the journey. We've heard from some victims that when they've been visited by the police, when they've been called out for a domestic abuse incident, and they're given that reassurance and that support, and they feel believed, that they're more likely to then call 999 next time and ask for support. So the criminal justice process can be really difficult for victims of domestic or sexual violence. It's quite a scary thing to stand up in court and talk about the sort of intimate details of what's happened to you, especially in sexual violence cases where you're maybe talking about something that you may feel there's some stigma attached to it, or you may feel embarrassed in sort of going into the detail around it. So it adds an extra level of anxiety to victims when they are going into court and having to go through that process. For victims of sexual and domestic abuse, it can be really re-traumatising for them to go over their experience within a statement or at court. It can put them back in the place that they were when the incident happened, and they may need a lot of support through that process to be able to recover afterwards. Victims of sexual violence may also find that when they're cross-examined, there can be some victim blaming language that is used, or they may feel that they are being blamed for what happened to them. And some things can be used, such as they walked home alone, or they'd been drinking, and they may be things that they had thought themselves, or that maybe even family members had mentioned to them, that they had sort of beaten themselves up over anyway. For them to then have that reinforced in court can be really traumatising to them, and it can set them back in their recovery. There is a feeling amongst victims of sexual abuse that the system is not set up for them and that they are not empowered throughout the process. Victims of these crimes can feel let down by the criminal justice process. Some victims can feel that sentencing is too lenient in these crime types and can feel that even if they have received a positive outcome at court, that this isn't enough. Professionals can support victims through this process, knowing that they can feel that it's not set up for them, by providing them with someone to listen to, empathy and compassion, and making sure that they manage those expectations from the very beginning and make sure that everything is very clear throughout the process and they're updated at all times. Then when it gets to that point at the end of the process, if they do feel that they haven't achieved what they wanted to achieve, at least it doesn't come as a surprise to them.